The night began with a strange kind of energy, the kind that settles into the air before anyone knows something unforgettable is about to happen. The theater was filled with warm lights, soft chatter, and the excited rustling of people waiting for the show to begin. Cameras were everywhere, lined across the aisles like glowing eyes, quietly watching every movement. The audience was ready for a calm, elegant night. No one knew that before the show ended, they would witness a moment that would travel around the world, a moment that would make people cry, question their hearts, and wonder how long something so fragile could stay hidden between two people who had always carried themselves with respect, kindness, and quiet resilience. But for now, everything looked normal. Keanu Reeves sat backstage, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his fingers gently twisting together as if his hands were searching for courage. He had been on hundreds of stages under thousands of lights, but tonight felt different. Something inside him was heavy, almost trembling. He tried to hide it from everyone else, smiling politely when people passed by, nodding when someone asked if he was ready, but the truth was simple and quiet. He was not ready. His mind kept replaying one moment from earlier that afternoon, a moment so unexpected that it shook him in a way he could not understand. He had tried to ignore it, but the thought kept returning like a whisper he could not escape. Sandra Bullock, standing on the opposite side of the stage, felt a similar weight pressing on her chest. She had always been composed, steady, gentle in her presence. People said she had a calming energy, the kind that made others around her feel safe. But tonight, something inside her felt unsettled, like the floor beneath her feet was slowly shifting. She kept inhaling and exhaling, repeating in her mind that everything was fine, that nothing strange was happening, that this was just another show. But deep down, she knew that Keanu had avoided looking into her eyes ever since they arrived. And if there was one thing she understood after all these years, it was that Keanu only avoided someone when he was carrying something too heavy for his heart. The show began with loud applause. Bright lights washed over the stage, warming everyone under their glow. Sandra stepped forward first, smiling, waving gently at the crowd, while Keanu followed with his familiar soft grin. The audience cheered even louder when they stood side by side. It was always like this. People loved seeing them together. There was a kind of natural comfort between them that made audiences feel something real, something human. They balanced each other in a way that never seemed forced. Everyone could feel it, even if no one dared to explain it. But tonight something was off. While Sandra spoke to the audience, Keanu kept glancing at her, not with romantic intensity, but with a deep concern that almost looked like fear. His eyes kept searching her face as if he was looking for an answer to a question he could not speak aloud. Sandra felt the weight of his gaze, but tried to keep her expression relaxed. She continued speaking, but inside her thoughts were racing. Why did he look like that? What happened earlier? Why was he acting like something terrible was about to happen? The host stepped onto the stage, ready to begin the interview. Everything was planned, rehearsed, timed perfectly. But the moment the host asked their first question, Keanu did not answer. Instead, he inhaled sharply as if gathering something painful in his chest. Sandra turned toward him, confused by his silence. The host tried again, but Keanu still did not speak. The audience exchanged glances, unsure if this was part of the show. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. Sandra reached out gently and placed her hand on Keanu's arm. The touch was soft, almost invisible, but it made Keanu's breath catch. He slowly lifted his head and looked at her with eyes full of something she had never seen in him before. Not sadness, not fear. It was something deeper, something fragile, something close to breaking. And then it happened. Keanu suddenly stood up, startling the host and the audience. The room fell silent. Sandra froze, her hand still hovering where his arm had been. The crew backstage leaned forward, sensing something unexpected. Keanu's voice trembled as he whispered Sandra's name, but the microphone caught it, echoing softly across the entire theater. Sandra blinked, her heart tightening. "Keanu, what is it?" she asked, her voice low, gentle, almost afraid to push too far. Keanu stepped forward, then another step, closing the distance between them until he was standing right in front of her. The audience held its breath. His face looked tense, like he was fighting something inside him, something he had carried for too long. He lifted his hand halfway, as if wanting to touch her, but stopped himself, respecting her space even in this moment of breaking. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, his voice raw. The host looked lost. The producers backstage exchanged frantic looks. Cameras zoomed in. Everyone felt the shift of energy, the heaviness, the tenderness, the fear, but no one knew what Keanu was about to reveal. Sandra took a small step closer, her eyes soft, her shoulders slightly trembling. "You're scaring me," she said, trying not to let her voice crack. "What happened?" Keanu swallowed hard. His jaw tightened as though he was holding back a storm. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his breathing, then opened them again with a look that made Sandra feel something deep in her chest, something old and buried. "Earlier today," he began, "I heard something I never expected, and it changed everything for me." The audience leaned even closer. Sandra froze. A soft shiver ran down her spine. "What did you hear?" she whispered. Keanu looked down for a moment, his hair falling slightly forward, hiding his eyes. When he finally lifted his head again, he looked like someone who had just lost and found something at the same time. "I heard someone talking about you," he said, "about something you never told me." Sandra felt her stomach drop. The room seemed to shrink around her. She tried to keep her expression calm, but her chest tightened. She could not think of anything she had kept hidden from him, nothing that could make him look this broken. "Keanu, what did they say?" He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He took another breath, his eyes glistening with a sadness that made Sandra's heart ache. She stepped closer and gently touched his wrist, grounding him. And then Keanu whispered something so soft, so fragile, that the entire theater leaned in to hear it. "They said you're hurting," he said, "and I never saw it, I never noticed, I never asked." Sandra froze. The world around her stopped. Keanu's voice trembled. "Someone told me you've been going through something alone, something heavy, something you didn't want anyone to see, and when I heard it, I felt like I failed you." Sandra's breath grew unsteady. Her eyes began to sting with emotion she tried to hide. Keanu stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I rushed here tonight because I couldn't sit still. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I needed to know the truth from you. I needed to look you in the eyes and ask if you're okay." The audience sat in absolute silence. Not a single whisper, not a single breath. Sandra's hands shook as she slowly clasped them together. She looked at Keanu and felt something inside her unraveling. She had built her life on strength, on smiles, on being the person others leaned on. She had mastered the art of hiding her pain because she never wanted to burden anyone. And Keanu, he had always been the one person she wanted to protect from her struggles. He had already carried so much in his life. But now he stood before her, raw and open, telling her he cared enough to stop the entire show. She tried to speak, but emotion caught her voice. Keanu stepped even closer, his voice barely a whisper now. "Sandra, please tell me the truth. Are you really okay?" A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. The audience felt it, the world felt it. This moment was no longer a show. It was human, real, painful, tender. And just when Sandra opened her mouth to finally answer him, the stage lights flickered sharply. A sudden noise echoed from backstage. Everyone turned sharply toward the sound, and the screen behind them began glitching, as if someone was trying to interrupt the show. Sandra gasped softly. Keanu stepped protectively in front of her, and the audience held its breath as something unexpected began to appear on the giant screen. Just before everything cut to black. For a moment, the theater existed in a strange kind of darkness, not the soft darkness that comes before a show starts, but a sharp, unsettling silence that made everyone hold their breath. People murmured in confusion, trying to understand what had caused the sudden blackout. Sandra felt Keanu's presence right in front of her, steady and protective, like he had stepped between her and the unknown without even thinking. He turned his head slightly, listening for any sound that might explain the interruption, but all he heard was the nervous shifting of the audience and the faint hum of emergency lights preparing to activate. Slowly, the backup lights flickered on, casting a dim but steady glow over the stage. The audience could now see Keanu standing slightly ahead of Sandra, his posture tense, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed toward the dark backstage area. Sandra placed a hand over her heart, trying to calm the rapid beating inside her chest. The moment before the blackout had already shaken her, and now this sudden disruption made her feel even more exposed, as if the universe itself had paused to question what she was about to reveal. The host stepped forward cautiously, holding a small flashlight and speaking with forced calm. "Everyone, please remain seated. We're experiencing a minor technical issue. The team is working on it." His words were soothing on the surface, but underneath them there was a tremble that even the audience could feel. Keanu turned back to Sandra, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, though worry sat behind his calm tone like a shadow that refused to move. Sandra nodded faintly, but it was clear she was still shaken. Keanu reached out and lightly touched her elbow, an instinctive gesture of support. The simple warmth of his hand grounded her, reminding her that she wasn't alone even if she had spent years convincing herself she had to be. The producers rushed on stage, whispering updates to the host, who kept nodding nervously. One of them approached Keanu and Sandra quietly, saying, "We're not sure what caused the blackout. The main screen malfunctioned on its own. We're checking the system." The producer's voice had a strange tone, not just confusion, but also something close to worry, like this wasn't the kind of mistake that happened accidentally. Keanu's eyes narrowed. "The screen malfunctioned?" he asked, as in someone triggered it. The producer hesitated. "We're not saying that yet, but something unusual appeared on the display before it died." Sandra felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean something unusual?" The producer glanced around nervously and lowered his voice even further. A video window began opening, something that wasn't part of the show. It looked like someone was trying to stream a message. We didn't get to see what it was because the screen shut down almost immediately. Keanu exchanged a tense look with Sandra. The blackout no longer felt random. It felt intentional, and that made everything feel heavier. The audience began to grow restless, their murmurs growing louder, filled with confusion and curiosity. The host tried to keep the mood light, telling a soft joke, but the tension in the room didn't lift. Even the air felt thick, as if the building itself held a secret no one was supposed to hear. Keanu gently guided Sandra a few steps toward the corner of the stage where they could speak more privately. "You don't have to tell me right now," he whispered, his voice warm and patient. "Whatever you're going through, I'm here. I'm not rushing you." His kindness pressed against her heart like a gentle weight. She looked at him, her voice soft. "Keanu, it's not that I don't want to tell you. I didn't expect tonight to turn into this." He nodded. "I know. I didn't expect it either. But whatever this is, whatever that screen was about, it's connected somehow. And maybe it's time we stop pretending everything is fine." Sandra lowered her gaze. She had built walls for so long that she no longer remembered what it felt like to let someone see the cracks. But standing in front of Keanu, someone who had always handled every part of her life with respect and gentleness, she felt something inside begin to soften. Before she could speak, the speakers crackled suddenly with static. Everyone flinched. The static grew louder, like a whisper trying to break through. The host froze. The crew stared at the equipment as if waking up from a nightmare. Keanu instinctively stepped closer to Sandra again, shielding her without realizing it. Then the static faded, and a faint voice replaced it. "Sandra." The word echoed across the theater, soft but unmistakable. The audience gasped. Sandra's breath caught. Keanu's eyes widened. The voice came again, slightly clearer this time, trembling as though it belonged to someone who had been waiting a long time to be heard. "Sandra, please listen." Sandra took a step back, shock rippling through her entire body. "No," she whispered. It can't be." Keanu turned sharply toward her. "You know this voice." Her hands began to shake. She pressed them against her chest as if trying to keep her heart from breaking open. The voice, though distorted and weak, carried a familiarity she could not deny, a familiarity that tugged at old memories she had tried to bury. "Sandra, I'm sorry." Keanu reached for her hand, steadying her as she swayed. "Tell me," he said softly, "who is it?" Her lips trembled. "It sounds like someone I haven't heard in a very long time." Before Keanu could ask anything more, the screen behind them suddenly flickered back to life with a burst of chaotic lines and shifting colors. The audience fell completely silent. Sandra squeezed Keanu's hand tightly, her pulse racing. A grainy video appeared. Not clear, not stable, but enough to show the blurred outline of a person. The figure leaned closer toward the camera, the image distorted, glitching as if someone was fighting to keep the connection alive. The voice repeated softly, "Sandra, please don't be afraid." And then the figure leaned even closer. Sandra's eyes widened with horror. "No, no, this is impossible." She stepped backward, her breathing unsteady. Keanu caught her by the arm before she could stumble. "Sandra, look at me," he said gently. "You're safe, I'm right here." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Keanu, that voice, it sounds like my brother." Keanu's heart nearly stopped. He knew the story. He knew Sandra had lost her brother years ago, suddenly, painfully, leaving a hole in her life she never spoke about. She had told him once, in a moment of rare vulnerability, that the silence after her brother's passing was the hardest part, not the absence of his voice, but the feeling that she had never gotten to say goodbye. And now here was a voice, coming from nowhere, calling out to her in front of thousands. Keanu tightened his hand around hers. Sandra, it can't be him, it must be someone using. But before he could finish, the figure on the screen stabilized for a moment, long enough for the audience and the entire world to see a clearer shape. Long enough for Sandra to recognize the jawline, the eyes, the familiar tilt of a smile she had once known as home. Her knees nearly gave out. Keanu caught her instantly, holding her against him. The audience gasped. The host covered his mouth. The video glitched again, and the figure faded before coming back, as if trapped between worlds. And then the voice whispered something that shattered the last bit of control Sandra had left. "I didn't mean to leave you." Sandra broke into silent tears. Keanu held her tighter, his own breath unsteady, his mind racing to understand how this was happening. He knew there were many cruel ways people used technology, but this was different. This felt deeply personal, targeted, intentional. The video flickered again, and then the screen went completely dark. The theater dropped back into silence. Sandra buried her face into Keanu's shoulder, her entire body trembling. Keanu placed a steady hand on the back of her head, holding her with gentleness and strength, shielding her from the hundreds of eyes staring at them. He whispered softly, "It's okay, I'm here, I won't let anyone hurt you." The producers ran onto the stage again, panicked, unsure what to do. The host tried to calm the crowd, but no one was paying attention anymore. All eyes were on Sandra and Keanu, wrapped in a moment that felt too raw for a public stage. Keanu lifted his head, his expression changing from shock to determination. He looked at the producers with a seriousness that made them freeze. "Find out who did this," he said quietly but with a tone that left no room for hesitation. "And stop the show." The producer nodded quickly. "Yes, of course, we're ending everything now." Keanu gently guided Sandra off stage, one arm still wrapped around her as she struggled to breathe through her shock. They moved through the backstage hallway, the lights dim and the crew stunned into silence. Keanu didn't let go of her hand for even a second. When they reached a quiet room at the end of the hall, he closed the door behind them and guided her to sit. She wiped her tears shakily, still unable to speak. Keanu crouched in front of her, his voice soft and filled with empathy. "Sandra, talk to me. What's going on? Who would do something like that?" She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "Keanu, my brother's last message to me was lost. I never got to hear it. And I've always wondered what he wanted to say, but that voice tonight, it sounded exactly like him. The same tone, the same sadness." Keanu placed a hand over hers, steady and gentle. "We'll figure this out together. You don't have to go through this alone." Sandra looked into his eyes, her heart trembling with fear and confusion. But what if the message wasn't fake? What if it was real? Keanu hesitated, not wanting to dismiss her feelings, but also not wanting her to fall into a fear that could break her even further. "We'll find the truth," he said softly. "Whatever it is, you won't face it without me." Sandra nodded slowly, but her eyes still held a deep, painful uncertainty. And just when she finally steadied her breath, a knock sounded at the door. Soft, hesitant. Keanu stood quickly, his protective instincts rising again. He opened the door just a few inches. A stage assistant stood there, trembling. "Keanu, Sandra, you need to see this," she whispered. Someone left a note for Sandra, and it was placed where no one should have been able to go. Keanu's eyes narrowed. "A note, what does it say?" The assistant swallowed nervously, holding out a small folded paper. "It says," she whispered, "this is only the beginning." Sandra's breath caught. Keanu's expression darkened with determination. The mystery had only just begun. The small note trembled in the assistant's hands as Keanu reached out and gently took it. The hallway outside the private room was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something was watching, something waiting. The lights above flickered softly, though no one touched the switches. Sandra kept her gaze fixed on the little folded paper, her breath shallow, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and confusion. She wasn't sure if she wanted to know what was written inside, or if knowing would pull her deeper into something she wasn't ready to face. Keanu unfolded the note slowly, carefully, as though the paper itself might break apart. His brows furrowed the moment he saw the writing inside. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, almost as if the writer's hand had trembled the entire time. But what stood out most was the strange familiarity in the slant of the letters, the shape of the curves. It made Sandra's skin crawl. "What does it say?" Sandra whispered, her voice barely audible. Keanu hesitated. He didn't want to hurt her, he didn't want to feed her fear, but hiding it would only make it worse. He read softly, "Sandra, you were never meant to forget." Her breath hitched. She pressed her fingers to her lips, trying to steady the sudden rush of emotion flooding through her. Keanu carefully refolded the note, keeping his movements calm even though his heart thudded heavily inside his chest. "Where did you find this?" Keanu asked the assistant. "That's the strange part," she said, glancing nervously at Sandra. "It was placed on her dressing room table, but the room was locked, and no one has been inside since the show began." Keanu's jaw tightened. So someone got into a locked room without being seen. The assistant nodded slowly. Keanu took a deep breath and softened his tone. "Thank you, we'll handle it from here." The assistant left quickly, almost relieved to escape the heavy atmosphere pressing against the walls. Keanu closed the door and turned back to Sandra, who was sitting very still, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing. She looked like a person who had been pulled back into a memory she had tried desperately to bury. Keanu approached her slowly, kneeling down in front of her again, his voice gentle and steady. "Sandra, talk to me. What does this mean to you?" She swallowed hard, her eyes glassy with unspoken pain. "Keanu, my brother, wrote something similar to me once, before he passed." She paused, her voice trembling. "He told me I needed to let go of something I didn't even know I was holding on to, and then everything happened so suddenly." Keanu's heart softened. He reached out and held her hands carefully, grounding her once again. "You don't need to explain everything right now, but please don't shut me out." She blinked away the tears that gathered at the corners of her eyes. "I'm not trying to shut you out. I just don't know how to make sense of any of this." Keanu nodded. "I understand, but we're going to find answers together." Sandra closed her eyes briefly, letting his words settle into her shaken heart. She trusted Keanu more than anyone. His presence gave her courage to face things she never thought she'd have to face again. But before she could speak again, the hallway outside stirred with sudden hurried footsteps. Someone knocked on the door, not softly like before, but urgently, almost desperately. Keanu rose to his feet and opened it cautiously. A security guard stood there, sweat collecting along his forehead, his breathing uneven. He had the look of someone who had seen something they wished they hadn't. "Mr. Reeves, Ms. Bullock, you both need to come with me," he said quickly. "There's something you should see. It's about the video from earlier." Sandra felt her stomach twist again. Keanu stepped slightly in front of her, instinctively creating a barrier of protection as he asked, "What did you find?" The guard hesitated. "I can't explain it. You both have to see it yourself." Keanu turned back to Sandra, offering his hand. She took it, her fingers still trembling. Together they followed the guard down the hallway. Each step echoed through the silent corridor, building tension with every movement. Sandra held Keanu's hand tightly, grounding herself in the warmth of his steady presence. They reached a small security room filled with screens displaying different angles of the theater. Technicians and security staff were huddled around one particular monitor, their expressions tense and unsettled. When Keanu and Sandra entered, the room fell silent, and everyone stepped aside to give them space. "Play it," the guard instructed. The technician nodded hesitantly and tapped a few keys. The footage rewound to the moment before the blackout. The main stage screen flickered, then glitched, then began to show the blurry figure. Sandra breathed in slowly, already feeling emotion rising in her chest. Keanu gently rested a hand on her back. But then the technician paused the screen. "Zoom in," the guard said softly. The image magnified. The figure became a little clearer, still glitching, still distorted but clearer. The room grew colder. Keanu's eyes widened in disbelief. Sandra stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. Because there in the corner of the frame, barely visible but undeniably present, was another shadow, a silhouette standing behind the blurred figure. Tall, still, unmoving. "What is that?" Keanu murmured. "We don't know," the technician whispered. But that shadow wasn't visible to the audience. It only showed up on the recording from our internal cameras. It's not part of the show, and it shouldn't have been there. Sandra hugged herself, feeling a tremor beneath her skin. Someone was backstage. The guard shook his head slowly. "That's the problem. No one was recorded entering that area. All access points were locked. Motion sensors didn't detect anyone. It's like the shadow appeared from nowhere." The room felt suffocating. Keanu leaned closer to the screen, studying the blurred figure closely. Then he noticed something small but undeniable. He pointed at the monitor. "Look at the figure, their shoulders, the way they lean, the way they tilt their head." His voice softened. "Sand, it looks like they're trying to mimic your brother's posture." Sandra covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Why would someone do that?" Keanu looked at her gently, his voice low. "Someone wants to hurt you, or confuse you, or break you down." The technician hesitated before speaking again. "There's more." He pressed another button, and the video advanced a few seconds. The figure turned, as if looking over their shoulder. And in that moment, something glimmered at the edge of the screen, a reflection. Faint, fast, but unmistakable. A metal keycard. A keycard that could open restricted rooms. Sandra gasped, and Keanu's expression hardened. "Someone had authorized access," Keanu whispered. "Someone who works in this building." Fear rippled through the room. The guard cleared his throat. "Mr. Reeves, MS Bullock, this isn't just a malfunction or a prank. Someone planned this. Someone who knew the building's security. Someone who wanted you both to see that message." Sandra wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold despite the warmth of the room. "But why me? Why now?" Keanu stepped closer, his voice soft but filled with a steady determination. "Because something you've kept inside for years, something connected to your brother, someone else knows about it." Her eyes widened. "That's impossible. I never told anyone." "Someone found out," Keanu said. "Or someone wants you to believe they found out." Sandra shook her head, overwhelmed. Emotions she had buried long ago were clawing their way back to the surface, mixing with fear, confusion, and the ache of memories she wasn't ready to revisit. Keanu placed a gentle hand behind her back, grounding her. "We're going to get answers," he whispered. "I won't let this break you, not now, not ever." The room fell silent again. And then, suddenly, one of the screens in the security room flickered. Not the stage footage this time, but a hallway camera. A new message appeared across the screen, written in the same shaky handwriting as the note. "She needs to remember." Sandra's knees weakened. Keanu grabbed her before she fell, holding her against his chest. Everyone in the room froze. The technician whispered, "This message wasn't sent through our system. It appeared on its own." Sandra felt tears slip down her face as she clung to Keanu. "Why is this happening?" she whispered. Keanu held her close, his voice firm and protective. "Whoever is doing this wants to push you, to force you to face something painful, but you are not alone. We will face it together." The technician pointed at the screen, his voice shaky. "The message is changing." Everyone turned sharply toward the monitor. New words began forming slowly, letter by letter, as if someone or something was typing from somewhere unseen. He wasn't the only one who left a message. Sandra's heart almost stopped. Keanu's grip tightened around her, his protective instinct flaring. And then the final line appeared, sending chills through every person in the room. One of the messages was for him. Keanu's eyes widened. Sandra gasped. Fear, shock, confusion, everything collided inside them. Because whoever sent that message now hinted that Keanu was also connected to this mystery. The room went completely still. It was the kind of stillness that didn't feel empty. It felt charged tight, like the air itself was holding its breath. Sandra stared at the screen, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Keanu stood frozen beside her, his jaw tense, his eyes fixed on the final line of the message glowing across the monitor. One of the messages was for him. Him. The word echoed in Sandra's mind like a distant trembling bell. Her throat tightened as she turned to look at Keanu. His expression had shifted, not just into confusion, but something deeper, something that looked like recognition tugging at the edge of his memory. "Keanu," she whispered softly, almost afraid to disturb the fragile moment. "What does that mean? Do you know something?" He shook his head slowly, but his eyes remained glued to the screen, as if the message had grabbed him by the spine. "I don't know. I don't understand, but something about this." He paused, trying to put words to a feeling he hadn't fully processed. "It feels like it's not just about you anymore." The guard cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Reeves, did you receive anything unusual recently? Any messages, calls, letters?" Keanu's brows furrowed. He hesitated. "No," he started, but then stopped himself. A flicker of memory rose in his mind, something small, easy to forget, but strangely heavy now that he thought about it. "Actually," he said quietly, his voice lowering, "something did happen. It didn't seem important at the time." Sandra turned fully toward him, her worry deepening. "What happened?" Keanu sighed slowly and rubbed the back of his neck, his mind working to recall the moment. "2 days ago, a driver delivered a package to my house. No name on it, no return address, just a small black envelope." Sandra felt her breath catch. "What was inside?" "Nothing," Keanu said. "Or almost nothing. It was blank, just a single empty sheet of paper. I thought it was a mistake." Sandra's eyes widened. "Keanu, what if it wasn't blank?" Keanu froze. "What do you mean?" She took a deep, trembling breath. "My brother used to leave messages written in ink that only showed under heat. He did it for fun at first, but later, he did it for serious things too. Private things." Keanu's heartbeat kicked into something faster. "So you think?" "Maybe that blank page wasn't blank," she whispered. "Maybe it was waiting to be revealed." The technician, still visibly shaken from the strange messages appearing on the screens, stepped forward cautiously. "Do you still have the envelope?" Keanu nodded. "It's in my car. I didn't throw it away." The room shifted instantly. Everyone began moving with a sense of urgency, a mix of fear and determination guiding their steps. Keanu gently wrapped an arm around Sandra's shoulders, steadying her as they made their way out of the security room and down the dim hallway. The building felt different now, more hollow, more watchful. Shadows stretched long across the floors as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Sandra stayed close to Keanu, feeling his quiet strength beside her. Despite everything happening around them, his presence was still the one thing that made her feel grounded. Outside, the night air hit them with a sharp coolness, a contrast to the heavy tension inside the theater. The parking lot was nearly empty, illuminated only by scattered overhead lights and the distant hum of city traffic. Keanu unlocked his car and reached into the glove compartment, retrieving the envelope. He held it carefully, almost reverently, as if afraid it might crumble in his hands. Sandra stepped closer, her breath catching when she saw it, the plain black envelope, smooth and silent, carrying a weight that felt heavier than paper. "Let's go inside," Keanu said quietly, nodding toward the security room again. "They'll have tools to check it." Back in the room, the technician prepared a small heating device, something usually used to check counterfeit tickets. Keanu handed him the blank page. Everyone in the room gathered around closely, watching with narrowed eyes and tense shoulders. The technician held the paper gently over the heat source. At first, nothing happened. Sandra held her breath. Keanu's heart thudded painfully against his ribs. Then slowly, faint lines began appearing on the page. They were light at first, barely visible, like whispers trying to rise from silence. And then the letters grew clearer. Words began to form. Sentences. The technician's eyes widened. "Oh my God." Keanu leaned forward. Sandra clutched the back of his arm, her fingers tightening with each passing moment. The message finally revealed itself fully, written in the same shaky handwriting as the earlier note. Keanu read it aloud, his voice low and steady, though shock quivered at its edges. "Keanu, you will need to protect her. She will try to keep her pain hidden, but you must not let her face this alone. She is in danger because of something that was never meant to reach her. And when the time comes, you will see why this message is also meant for you." Sandra felt her knees weaken. Keanu swallowed hard, his chest tightening. The message continued. "The truth will hurt her, but it will hurt you too. Do not let fear silence you. You were connected long before you both understood it." Sandra looked at Keanu desperately. What does that mean? Why would you be connected to this? Keanu shook his head slowly, trying to piece together anything that could explain this strange warning. I don't know. I really don't know. The final line of the message stood alone, separated from the rest. When the shadow reveals itself, do not run. The technician looked up, confused. Shadow, as in the figure in the video. Keanu stiffened. It must be. Sandra shivered, hugging her arms around herself. Why is this happening now? Why us? Why tonight? Keanu gently touched her shoulder, his voice soft but filled with steady warmth. We'll figure it out. I promise you, you're not going through this alone anymore. Sandra looked into his eyes, feeling the sincerity, the kindness, the quiet strength he always carried. It brought her a strange kind of comfort, even in the middle of chaos. But before the moment could deepen, one of the security monitors flickered again. Everyone turned sharply toward it. The hallway camera that had shown the earlier message now displayed something new. Sandra gasped. Keanu's eyes widened. The technician jumped back. Because standing in the hallway, the same hallway they had just walked through, was the shadow figure, clear, unmoving, facing directly toward the camera. The figure didn't move, didn't shift, didn't breathe, just stood there still and silent. And then slowly, very slowly, it raised a hand, not waving, not threatening, but pointing toward the security room they were in. Sandra's breath caught painfully in her chest. Keanu stepped in front of her instantly, shielding her with his arms. The guards panicked, reaching for radio devices, shouting commands, sending officers rushing into the hallway. But the shadow figure didn't move. It kept pointing, as though signaling something, or someone, and then the screen glitched again. The image distorted. The figure dissolved in static, and a new message appeared in its place. This one written in bold, shaky letters that seemed almost engraved into the screen. It's closer than you think. The technician froze, whispering, this message, it's being written in real time. The letters continued forming. And he needs to remember, too. Keanu felt his heart turn cold. He whispered softly, almost to himself, remember what? Sandra took his hand, her grip desperate. But the screen wasn't finished. The final line appeared slowly, painfully, as though whoever wrote it wanted them to feel every second of dread. The truth is tied to both of you, and tonight it begins. The monitor snapped to black. Sandra trembled. Keanu pulled her close, holding her tightly. The room fell into stunned silence. No one spoke. No one breathed. Because now the mystery was no longer about Sandra alone. Keanu was part of it. And whatever had been hiding in the shadows had just stepped closer to them. Both the silence in the security room became so heavy that even breathing felt difficult. Sandra clung to Keanu's arm, her fingers trembling with the weight of everything that had unfolded. Keanu's grip around her was steady and protective, but inside he felt an unsettling coldness spreading through him. It wasn't fear for himself. It was fear for her, fear of what this shadow wanted, fear of what truth was pulling itself out of the darkness piece by terrifying piece. The guards rushed into the hallway where the shadow figure had been seen. Their footsteps echoed loudly through the building, but there were no shouts of discovery, no signs that anyone had been found. Moments later, their voices crackled through the radio, tense and shaken. There's no one here. The hallway is empty. Keanu exchanged a look with the head of security, a look that said without words that no one believed this figure had simply disappeared like smoke. Someone was behind this, someone who knew too much, someone who wanted to pull Sandra into this nightmare and drag Keanu with her. Keanu led Sandra away from the screens and into the quieter corner of the room. She looked fragile, her breath uneven, her eyes swimming with fear and confusion. He placed both hands gently on her shoulders, grounding her again. Sandra, he whispered softly, listen to me. I don't know what any of this means yet, but I promise you I'm not leaving your side. You are not facing this alone. She nodded, swallowing hard as she tried to steady herself. Keanu, what if this is something I was never supposed to uncover? What if my brother wanted to tell me something, but something stopped him? What if someone didn't want me to know the truth? Her voice cracked at the end, and Keanu instinctively pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she pressed her forehead against his chest. She felt his heartbeat, slow and steady, grounding her in a moment where everything else felt like chaos. "Your brother loved you," Keanu murmured gently. "Whatever message he left, it wasn't to hurt you, it was to help you, and whatever shadow is trying to scare you, it won't win. I won't let it." She closed her eyes, breathing in the warmth and comfort of his embrace. He always carried a calm strength, the kind that made the world feel safer. But tonight even that strength was being tested. After a few moments, they slowly pulled apart. Sandra wiped her eyes, but the fear didn't leave her expression. "Keanu, this message said it was for you too. Why would you be part of this?" Keanu exhaled slowly and ran a hand through his hair. "I've been trying to understand that. I can't think of anything your brother would have connected me to. We never met. But maybe," he paused, hesitant, "maybe there's something I forgot." Sandra frowned softly. "What do you mean?" He looked away, as if searching the corners of his memory. "Sometimes, people say I block out things when the past feels heavy. I don't always remember everything right away." She stepped closer, concern rising in her eyes. "Keanu, what happened 2 days ago besides the envelope? Did anything else feel strange?" Keanu hesitated again, and that hesitation told Sandra enough. There was something he hadn't spoken yet. Something that had been quietly troubling him long before tonight. "Keanu," she whispered gently, "what aren't you telling me?" He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes steady, honest, vulnerable. "I've been having dreams for about a week now, not clear dreams, but shadows, voices, someone calling a name I couldn't make out, and something else." He paused, swallowing hard. "Someone whispering that I forgot something important." Sandra inhaled sharply. "And you didn't think to tell me this?" He shook his head slowly. "I didn't know it mattered. I didn't want to worry you. I thought it was just stress or exhaustion. I didn't know it would connect to all of this." She softened immediately. "Keanu, you never have to carry things alone, not with me." Their eyes met, and for a moment the tension lifted, replaced by something warm and unspoken. But before either of them could lean into it, one of the monitors crackled again. Everyone in the room turned instantly. The screen came back on. Not glitching this time. Not distorted. But showing a hallway angle that none of them recognized. It wasn't from the theater. It wasn't from any room in the building. The walls looked old, faded with peeling paint and dim yellow lights. The camera angle was low, almost as if the device had been placed on the floor. And then footsteps echoed from somewhere inside the video. Soft, slow, deliberate. Sandra tensed beside Keanu, her fingers clutching his sleeve. The shadow figure appeared again, but this time clearer, closer, more defined. Still faceless, still blurred with an unnatural distortion, but moving with intention. It stepped into view, raising its head as if looking directly into the camera lens. "This is not one of our feeds," the technician whispered, backing away. "This is coming from an external source." The shadow reached out and placed something in front of the camera, a small object, dark and rectangular. The image zoomed in automatically, as though whoever was controlling the feed wanted them to see it. Sandra gasped. It was a keycard, the same kind that the security guard had found reflected in the earlier recording. But this one had a name scratched across it. Keanu Reeves. Keanu stared at it, shock tightening his chest. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." Sandra took a shaky step closer to the screen. "Who would make something like this? Why would they put your name on it?" Before anyone could answer, the shadow knocked the keycard aside, and the screen shifted again, this time showing writing on a wall. The message was written in deep red. Not blood, at least. No one wanted to believe that, but something dark enough to make tension twist through every person in the room. "He forgot, remind him." Sandra clutched Keanu's arm so tightly it almost hurt, but Keanu didn't flinch. He stepped in front of her protectively, his eyes hardening with determination. The writing continued as new words appeared. "Her truth is his truth." Keanu felt a chill crawl up his spine. This is someone playing with us." The technician shook his head. "Or someone trying to reveal something." "Reveal what?" Keanu demanded. But the screen was not done. The shadow moved again, walking deeper into the dark hallway. It pushed open a door that creaked loudly through the speakers. Beyond that door was a room filled with scattered papers, broken pieces of furniture, and dust thick enough to cover memories. The camera moved closer, revealing a small wooden box on a table. Someone or something had carved Sandra's initials into the top. Sandra's breath caught painfully in her throat. "That's impossible." Keanu turned to her. "What is it? Do you recognize that box?" She shook her head at first, confused, overwhelmed, but then suddenly her eyes widened. "Keanu, I used to have a box like that when I was young. I kept letters inside. My brother used to slip notes into it when I wasn't looking. But that box was lost when I moved. I haven't seen it in years." Keanu's voice lowered. "Then how is it in this video?" The answer came before anyone could speak. New writing appeared on the screen, drawn slowly across the wall behind the box, as though an invisible hand was moving across it. "The past is not lost, it is waiting." Sandra felt tears forming again, but this time they weren't from fear alone. They were from the sharp ache of memories she had buried so deeply she no longer knew how to hold them. Keanu stepped closer to her, wrapping a reassuring arm around her. "Sandra, whatever is happening, we'll figure it out." But the screen suddenly went black again, cutting off the moment. Everyone held their breath. The silence lasted only a few seconds before a new message flashed, larger, bolder, and far more threatening. "Come find me or I come for you." Security scrambled. The technician backed away. The guard cursed under his breath. And Sandra's hand flew to her chest, pressing over her pounding heart. Keanu's voice darkened with fierce protective resolve. "This has gone far enough. We're not waiting for this shadow to make another move. We're ending this tonight." Sandra looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. "Keanu, what does that mean?" He squeezed her hand gently. "It means we're going to that place. The one in the video, we're going to find the box. We're going to find the truth." Sandra shook her head, fear tightening her breath. "Keanu, what if it's dangerous?" He stepped closer, his voice steady and full of warmth. "Then we'll face it together, but we're not running anymore, not from fear, not from memories, not from whatever this thing thinks it can control." Sandra looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the man everyone admired, but the man who had stood beside her through every terrifying moment of this night. A man who chose kindness even in chaos. A man who held her when she was breaking. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered, "we go together." But as they prepared to leave the room, the lights flickered once more, and the screen flashed a final message, one that made both their hearts stop. "You're already too late," the message on the screen. "You're already too late," settled over the room like a cold fog. Sandra felt a deep tremor inside her chest, a sensation that something precious had slipped just beyond reach. Keanu tightened his hold on her arm, grounding her again, his expression darkening with determination. He refused to accept the idea that time had already defeated them. "We're not too late," he whispered, mostly to reassure her, but also to steady his own heart. "We're still here, we still have choices." The security team scrambled around them, unsure what direction to take. The technician kept staring at the blank screen, as if waiting for it to flicker back on and deliver another impossible message. The guard spoke into his radio in short, urgent bursts. Everything felt chaotic, tense, but Keanu and Sandra moved through it with a quiet, shared focus. "We're going to that place," Keanu said firmly. "The room in the video, the hallway, wherever that box is, we're finding it." Sandra hesitated for a moment, fear clouding her expression. "Keanu, what if this is a trap? What if we walk into something designed to hurt us?" He stepped closer, gently cupping her arms with both hands. "Maybe it is," he admitted softly. "But if we don't go, we'll never know the truth, and you deserve the truth. Whatever your brother tried to tell you, we can't run from it anymore." Her eyes glistened with emotion. He always had a way of reminding her of her own strength, even when she felt like she was unraveling. She breathed deeply, nodded once, and held on to him with steady resolve. They left the building through a back exit, escorted by two guards who insisted on accompanying them. The air outside had a cold bite to it, unusual for the season, as though the night itself sensed the weight of what they were walking into. Sandra pulled her coat tighter, and Keanu instinctively stepped closer, shielding her from the wind. "The location from the video isn't far," one guard said, checking his phone. "Someone traced the feed source. It came from an old storage building 3 blocks away." Sandra frowned. Storage building? That doesn't make sense. I've never been here before. Maybe that's why whoever did this chose it, Keanu murmured. Something forgotten, something hidden. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the streets surprisingly empty for the hour. Each step felt heavier than the last, but neither of them paused. Sandra felt her heartbeat echo in her ears, her mind replaying the messages, the shadow, the strange final warning. When they reached the building, it looked exactly like the hallway in the video, old, weathered, almost abandoned. The paint peeled from the walls and the windows were dusty with age. A broken light above the entrance flickered weakly. One guard stepped forward cautiously. "We'll go first." Keanu shook his head. "No, this is for us. Stay behind us, but let us lead." The guard hesitated, then nodded. Keanu reached for Sandra's hand. She intertwined her fingers with his, her grip firm despite her trembling. Inside, the building smelled of dust and stillness. The hallway stretched ahead of them, dimly lit by old bulbs that hummed faintly. It was exactly like the video, every crack, every broken tile, every shadow. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. Keanu squeezed her hand gently. "You're not alone," he whispered. They walked deeper into the hallway until they reached the door the shadow had opened in the video. It was old, wooden, and slightly ajar. Keanu pushed it open slowly, revealing the same room filled with scattered papers and broken furniture. And there, on the table in the center of the room, was the wooden box. Sandra froze. Her knees weakened. Keanu quickly held her up. "Easy, I've got you." She stepped forward slowly as though approaching a memory made real. Her eyes softened with a mix of disbelief and longing. This was mine," she whispered. "I had the same box when I was a child, same color, same carving, exactly the same." Keanu watched her with quiet worry. "Open it when you're ready." Her hands trembled as she reached out and touched the box. The surface was cold, almost unnaturally so. She lifted the lid slowly. Inside was a stack of folded notes. The handwriting belonged to her brother. Sandra gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Keanu stepped closer, his heart breaking at the sight of her pain and love colliding so fiercely. "Oh God," she whispered, "these are his. These were the letters he used to leave for me." But one letter sat on top, newer, cleaner, written differently. Keanu noticed the difference immediately. "Sandra, that one, it looks recent." She nodded slowly, reaching for it with trembling fingers. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting looked similar to the earlier messages, shaky, uneven, familiar yet wrong. The letter read, "Sandra, you must remember the night before he left. The conversation you both forgot. It holds the truth. You didn't hear his final message because it was never lost. It was hidden." Sandra's breath hitched. "The night before he died, we had an argument. I tried not to remember it because it hurt so much." Keanu gently touched her shoulder. "What happened?" Sandra closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. He told me I depended too much on carrying everything alone. He said I shut people out, that I kept my pain locked away and never let anyone help me. And I told him he didn't understand me. I told him I didn't need anyone." Her voice cracked. "That was our last conversation. I thought I ruined everything. I tried so hard to forget." Keanu's heart ached for her. "Sandra, your brother wasn't saying that to hurt you. He said it because he cared." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "But why bring this back now? Why show me this box? Why send these messages?" Keanu looked at the other notes, then at the room, then at the shadows around them. "Someone wants you to heal from something you buried. Someone wants you to face the pain you avoided." Sandra wiped her tears, trying to steady herself. But Keanu noticed something else in the box. Beneath the letters was a small object wrapped in cloth. He picked it up slowly and unwrapped it. Inside was a small tape recorder. Sandra gasped, "No, it can't be." Keanu held it gently. "This must be the message he left." Her hands covered her mouth. "I thought it was lost forever. I thought I'd never hear it." Keanu pressed the play button. For a moment, only soft static filled the room. Then a gentle, familiar voice came through. "Sandra, I don't know if you'll ever hear this. I hope you do. I want you to know something. I'm not leaving because I want to. I'm leaving because life is unpredictable and sometimes we can't choose our timing. But I need you to stop blaming yourself. You didn't fail me. You didn't push me away. You loved me in your own way, but you need to let people in. You need to let yourself be loved. Don't carry everything alone. And when the time comes, someone will stand beside you. Someone whose heart recognizes yours. Trust him. Trust yourself. Don't close your door to hope. Sandra broke into tears, collapsing softly as the words wrapped around her heart. Keanu caught her, cradling her close as she cried into his chest. "Breathe," he whispered gently. "Let it go. Let yourself feel it." She held onto him tightly, letting everything she had suppressed for years finally rise and spill out. When she calmed slightly, Keanu continued holding her, his chin resting against her hair. "Your brother loved you more than you knew," he whispered, "and he wanted you to live truly live." She nodded softly, tears still falling. "And he said someone would stand beside me." Keanu met her eyes gently. "I'm here," he whispered. "I've been here and I'm not going anywhere." Just then, the lights in the room flickered again. The shadow appeared in the doorway. But this time, something was different. The figure was still blurred but softer, not threatening, not reaching, just watching. Keanu stood protectively, pulling Sandra behind him, but the shadow didn't move closer. Instead, it lifted an arm and pointed toward the tape recorder. Then toward Sandra. Then slowly faded, dissolving into nothingness. Sandra whispered, "Keanu, I don't think the shadow was here to hurt us." Keanu exhaled slowly. "Maybe it was here to push you to the truth, to guide you." She looked into his eyes, her own still trembling with emotion. "And what about you? Why were you part of the message too?" Keanu brushed her cheek softly. "Maybe because someone believed I would be the one to stay by your side. Maybe because your brother trusted me, even before I knew it." They stood in the middle of the forgotten room, surrounded by memories, tears, and an ending that finally felt like a beginning. Sandra leaned into him, her voice soft, vulnerable, hopeful. "Keanu, thank you for not giving up on me." He held her gently, his voice warm. "I never will." Outside, the night air had softened. Inside, two hearts found a truth they had both been searching for. And somewhere in a place beyond shadows and fear, a voice at peace finally whispered goodbye.